to talk about. Oh, next to NLP, I suppose. So I discovered this somewhat after NLP, and it really fitted together. So I'm going to give you a lightning tour of what's quite a big topic, but I think it's got some really interesting things in it, particularly when you're thinking about customers and markets and how people think and how their values work. So that's where we're going to go. And I'll tackle the values from an evolutionary perspective because that's the easiest way to get it. Then afterwards, we can have a little discussion and see what you make of it. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
Brilliant.
Yep.
Right, let's get going then. So it's called the dynamics of change, and it's all about how our value systems create change, but not in the sense of personal, but in the sense of more global value systems. So let's take a look at that. So really the question is, what's life all about? You might like to think about that. What's life all about for you? I'm going to leave you that with an open question in terms of what we're going to talk about, and we'll move on with the rest of it. So what we're doing is we're exploring human values, and so what are they? Human values are things we move towards or away from. They're usually outside our consciousness, and they're the criteria for all our decisions. And they're our conscious expression of good and bad, right and wrong, just and unjust. They help us run our world, and they interact with our belief systems quite strongly as well. So they set up the parameters for our beliefs. So what we're doing today is we're exploring values theory. And this is about what our values are, not what we think they should be. So many people, when you talk about their values, will tell you what they think their values should be, rather than what they are. So we're going to look at what values are. We're going to put them in a wide context. We'll look at how our values originated, how they change, and how our actions and decisions are affected by our value systems. They're the strongest motivators we have as human beings. So here we have my little man or woman, whichever you like, with a sample of the value systems that they have. So we'll have value systems around our career, what's important to us in our career, what's important to us about our health, what's important to us about our family, relationships, parenting, and personal growth. And that's not an exclusive list. We will have many more lists. We'll have value systems around what's important in terms of a car or a meal or many other aspects. They're the things that help us make decisions. We'll move towards or away from things that are important to us. The interesting thing is when you collect those systems together and you have lots of them, what do you get then? And that's what we're going to look at today. So as we add all these systems together, what pops out? Can we see any patterns? Okay. So this is Clare Graves. He was Professor Emeritus Psychology in Union College, New York. He's dead now. He died a few years back. He was a bit of a brain, I think, is the best way to describe him. He was teaching psychology, but he just about had it, and he was either going to reframe the problem or abandon it. He did 20 years worth of work without really telling anybody what he was up to. And that's the first bit we're going to look at, to see what he was doing and how he did it. He would set essays and ask questions of all sorts of people. He'd be asking questions of his colleagues and his peer group, not telling them what he was doing. And he was pulling it all together over 20 years. And what we're going to go through is roughly what he found. And we can see how that impacts many levels of life and how we think about life. So a spiral of change, I guess, is a good way to talk about it. This is a word that gets knocked about quite a lot. The values people pick this up pretty early about memes, and I know that some of you use this word. It was actually coined by Richard Dawkins in his Selfish Gene book in '78, and it's about a unit of cultural information, a unit of psychological information. And that's really what values give us. They give us a way of looking at units of psychological information en masse, which gives us themes and ways of thinking, and then from the ways of thinking, doing what people do and what they say. In terms of the model we're looking at, a value system has 6 dimensions. It has a core intelligence which shapes that system, and we're going to talk about the core intelligences in a little while. It'll attach to that. It'll have symbols and icons and objects. I've just put a little picture in there of the American flag because it identifies one value system. There'll be themes that come up with the value systems. You've seen I've written green and common there. That was about the air bases and the nuclear stuff that was going on quite a while back. But it was stimulated by a particular value system. Then there are the mindsets. That leads to a worldview. And then at the bottom of that is the genes and biological coding. So we have life conditions. We have problems and challenges of existence. And in order to deal with those, we have to take decisions. We have to do decisions in terms of what's important to us. Principally, initially, to stay alive, but then as we get more sophisticated, to do other things. This produces worldviews. And out of those worldviews manifest what people think and what they do, the beliefs and behaviors. So it gives you an idea of how life conditions are the thing that most often will change value systems on a personal or a global level. You had a big value system change in the USA on 9/11. Your worldview shifted dramatically from something that happened and gave you a different challenge in your existence. So we're going to look at this from an evolutionary perspective and see how things shifted, because that'll give you an idea of what's happening. And the value systems I'm going to talk about, all of them are alive in every person. They're just expressed more or less. So you can think of, you can see some colors down the bottom under the third one of how people think. You can think of those of lights that glow brighter or dimmer depending how active that value system is. So this, of course, makes us very different, but it also makes us quite the same. Okay. Value systems have a life cycle. It's a normal curve. They'll come in. They'll be in the minds of prophets and visionaries. It'll spread, becomes cutting edge, gets to its peak, and it becomes a dominant thinking, and then it becomes rigid and it starts to disappear, just like most of the things that happen on a normal curve. Coping mechanisms no longer work, and before that happens, the next meme or next value system emerges, and that's what we've seen. What's really interesting is that these memes are emerging closer together. As you'll see, the early ones took quite a while to appear, but the later ones have been appearing very quickly. This just indicates the speed at which we're moving in the new world. So it turns out the human brain comes with potential software, like systems waiting to be turned on, and our life conditions, when they change, will turn these systems on. They're like latent upgrades. It's not guaranteed that the software will turn on, however. So we're going to look at the first value system. There's very little of this in its healthy form in the world. This is called a band. This is beige. These spirals have colors. You can see on the right of the screen there's a little set of symbols. We're starting at the bottom with beige. And this is our survival set. Excuse me. The world is an unknown and scary place. So this is bands of 5 or 6 people. In the early days, what was important is survival, instinct, biological imperatives. Basically, people got together for 3 things: food, warmth, and sex. And that was the imperatives. Small bands of people and spread out over the planet. There's not much of this left. Having said that, this survival system's alive in us, and when we when we get a serious disease, or we become an alcoholic, as hopefully not all of us would, or we take drugs, then we can slip down the value system until these kind of survival instincts and biological imperatives are all we've got left. It's very often the way that when people have news of extremely life-threatening disease like cancer or something like that, where they actually can't understand what the doctors are saying because they've slipped into this survival sense and their brain is not functioning at all in terms of understanding language and understanding the sort of concepts that the doctors may give them, because they're not functioning in age. So as I say, not much of this unless it's dysfunctional or unhealthy or in the disease state. What we do get, though, is the next system. So when the bands get bigger and they start to join together, you get tribes. We have tribes today. Some of the biggest tribes in the UK are the football crowds, football fans. I guess you two will have baseball.
We have American football.
Sorry, American football, baseball. Yeah. Very strong instinct, and it's the glue that sticks everybody together. When this starts to fail in companies, then they start to become unprofitable. It's very easy to rectify in companies. It's also the glue of families. It's the common things we share, and it's our need to belong. And I need to be part of a group. And along with that, in the past, there are a lot of mystical things and animistical things that would have gone along with it. But generally, we have a drive to be part of a group, to belong. And this is the purple color, the tribal sense. Oh, my machine's... So it's the kin spirit. The world's a mysterious place, and what's required here is safety, family, tradition, and rituals. From around 50,000 BC, these are the nearest timescales I get. So the bands come together, you get this tribal situation appearing, and different things become important. Now with more of us, we can be safely behind a fence or safely behind a stockade. It also means that people start to specialize. Canoe builders, hunters, cooks. So the organization of humans starts to change. And we do things for other people. We do things for the tribe, not just for ourselves. So the world's an extended family, and there's an allegiance here to the chiefs without question. When I was in Hawaii, back in the 90s, I was with some of the people that teach hula, some of the ancient dances, and they're called kumus. The kumu hulas, the hula teachers, and there's no way that you can talk to one of the dancers without going to the kumu first. And this is kind of a nice example of how purple comes through. So smart people respect your traditions, they do the rituals, and they comply with the mutual sacrifice ethics. So they'll give their life up for the tribe if necessary. Thinking is dominated by a search for safety, service. There's a fear of consequences, mainly from the chief, who's usually a strong person, and they preserve what's sacred. Now, there are definitely groups in the world that operate like this, and there are a few do's and don'ts. Information has to go through the chief. Written words, not much good. And they like to work in groups, and complex systems really won't work. This is not a complex mindset. Okay. So what happens when tribes become big? You inevitably get individuals appearing again. And this generates the next value system, which in spiral terms is red, and that's the red star. I've just given you a few images here to illustrate this kind of... I really like Bender. I think he's one of the best reds, you know, and that's really the attitude. The attitude of red is it's a power god. They're the villains and they're the heroes. They're the frontiers people in the United States who took the territories over. They're the Alexander the Great, the Genghis Khans. They are not constrained by anything. They are very egocentric, pretty clever. They have a perceptual apparatus that is tuned to look for weakness in other people. So here the world's a jungle. This is also the gang leaders that you have. Well, we have them here, but you have them more in America than we do. The sorts of things that are important to you is an expression of power, breaking restraints, or rather not being restrained. It's about control and domination, and it's about immediate gratification. So there's no time here for this group. So consequences in 2 weeks' time means absolutely nothing. It's impulsive, it's egocentric. These were the pioneers, the people in this red value system created a huge expansion of humankind across the globe, because they were the explorers and the conquerors, and they're still around. You have a lot of red salespeople who would whose their best idea for winning a sale is to kill the opposition. So here, the world's a jungle. Only the fittest or strongest will survive. They take what they can, look after number one, watch their backs and defend their reputation. And here, this is about losing face. If you're dealing with people like this, you cannot possibly allow them to lose face. Otherwise, they will be your enemy, and they will bear a grudge. Power, gratification, avoidance of shame. So a few do's and don'ts. You need to tell them what they're going to get out of it personally. Keep them busy. Logic is people appeals do not work. And if you can't defer rewards and punishment. And this is interesting because our criminal system deals, and yours too, deals with this particular value system a lot. And how much time can you spend in courts waiting for your punishment? A long time. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. But if you want somebody to create some change, they need a good deal of this in them. If they're going to change a business or an organization, there's no guilt here either. The person operating strongly from this value system will not care about people. They'll be quite happy to tread on people. They won't feel any guilt. In the extreme cases, in the past, they'd be quite happy to behead people or other horrible things. So it's got a huge amount of energy though. If you can harness it, massive amount of energy for forward movement in the right way. So it's good and bad. As you get more of this in the world, what happens is they build empires. And when you build empires, eventually you get to the point where one person can't handle it. And so what happens is it morphs to the next value system. The next value system bit of software lights up in order to handle that, because what you get is a passive hierarchy, which is the next system on. You see it in major religions. I've given you a little bit of I'm a bit of a Trekkie, so there's a Star Trek.
I like you even better, Roger.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you don't get me on the Star Trek. So there's the Borg, which I think is a great, and I think Star Trek is one of the best evocations of a clash of value systems. Mm. And the Borg illustrate one value system, and the Federation, another value system. So the Borgs are very definitely sit in this blue value system, this passive hierarchy, where everybody is focused on one thing. Interestingly enough, there's guilt in this system, and this is the first system where there's a consciousness of an outside force, the truth force, and that the world is a creation of God. And you've got your religious texts, you've got the Bible, the Torah, and the Quran. There's an ethic of honesty that appears here, and faith. So some interesting things here. And this blue system, because it's strong with rules and has an outside force, holds the red in check. it's purposeful, it's authoritarian. I've given you a couple of illustrations there of this system in action. But essentially, any bureaucratic system has a good portion of this in it. The armed forces will also run on this system because it's a system of rules, constraints. No company's accounting department needs to be blue. These are the people that keep order. They make things. They make the machinery work. This is the kind of talent of the blue value system when it's strongly lit up in people. That they're very good at rules, procedures, processes. The unfortunate mental thing is that they think it's the only way. Okay, so we're whizzing through this quite nicely, I think. So again, with the blue system, this is focused on helping other people. This is focused on others, where the consciousness has that kind of focus where they will look after other people in the system. They won't look after other people in another system, however. And again, whenever you get a system like that appearing, a value system like that appearing, where there are constraints, ultimately what happens is the constraints get broken by the next value system along. And that, in this case, this is the orange system. So we're now moving up that right-hand set of symbols into the orange symbol. And, oh, I'm going to do a little bit more in blue, I beg your pardon. So what's the world like? It's where you fulfill your rightful duty. Everything is order and everything has its place. And if you're a smart person in this system, you conform to the one right way. It's a very safe place to live, but it is about sacrificing the self, and your rewards come after death. So this is the first system where there are promises of things after death and after life. So there's quite a big shift in consciousness here, and it can be quite attractive. It's what's true and false, what's right or wrong. There's a response to guilt. The Catholic Church is pretty good at doing this. It allows you to find a meaning and purpose in life, and that's the interesting thing. So this is the first system that produces an idea in consciousness that there's a meaning and purpose to life beyond what's in reality. And it's about controlling impulses. It's rules around relationships and how you do how that happens. It's about controlling your basic instincts. So this is the blue truth force is a value system of control. It's controlling the reds. So you've got to set up routines. You need to be on time, and you need to be able to handle detail, and procedures are welcomed, and merit-based pay awards don't really work. This is a system where you're waiting for, it's dead man's shoes. You're waiting for your boss to retire so you can have his job. And that's the way of the world. This was very much the United Kingdom before Margaret Thatcher came along. Margaret Thatcher broke a massive amount of blue structures in our system. Trade unions, privatized businesses, privatized organizations. There was a huge smashing of these systems, which allowed the next system to be generated. I think you'll be quite familiar with this one. So this is orange. There's just a few symbols and pictures there of the. You might get the idea that this is drive. This again is focused on self. The world is full of opportunity. You want to win, achieve things, have the money, and have some smart things, and use technology. This seems to have kicked off around the Industrial Revolution as business and commerce started to change. It probably started before that, but that's the time that's generally kind of marked out for this. It's strategic enterprise. This is what we're engaged in business. This is not about going out and killing the opposition. This is about playing a game and winning so that we can go and play the game again and win some more. It's very opportunistic. It's a playground, and it's fun. You want to enjoy the competition, and you want to have your life improved by having decent cars, iPhones, iPads, Blackberries. All of those gadgets are really welcome. So we're in the world's got a lot of orange in it at the moment because there's a lot of gadgets and a lot of technology that continually streams through. And of course, we have to have the money to have those gadgets, so we need to win lots of business. Thinking's dominated by seeking the good life now. And this, again, is one of those value systems where now is more important than the future or the past. It's definitely the strive for independence. Whilst I said that this is what Margaret Thatcher generated in the UK, some while ago, one of her ministers said, get on your bike and go and look for work. That's what you need to do. So that's the kind of attitude, and being able to just continue to play the game and have fun. So there's a lot about status symbols in here. It's pointless quoting the rules. If you look at the little diagram, the organizational diagram, you can see the arrows where actually people will jump up a hierarchy. So they'll be on the shop floor 1 minute, and then they'll be doing something in senior management the next, and people will, in the blue system, will wonder how they managed to do it. This is what happened to me. I jumped from being on a laboratory bench to being in charge of a company in about 18 months. And
Yep.
I was accused of bribing people to do it. The thing here is that boundaries are, like the red, boundaries are really, really important. If you don't specify boundaries, particularly if you're thinking about sales, then the orange value system will bend the rules. They'll go all out to get it by bending the rules if necessary. So this is a very exciting value system, very much in 4 at the moment, and it's not the only system. When you've been in orange for a while, there's a question that kind of pops up, and it goes, there must be more to life than BMWs, smart cars, iPhones, iPads, and all of that kind of thing. And it kicks off the next value system, which is green, which is the social network. Just a few images there. The one at the top with the woman and the flower comes from Greenham Common. And you've got Stonehenge and people dancing around for world peace. So here we shift back to a focus on others, and the world's a global village. So this is the first system where consciousness starts to say, actually, it's not just about me in this country, it's about the whole world. Ecology starts to pop up. Organizations like Greenpeace, Oxfam, charities start to pop up and get big organizations. It's about equality, freedom, it's about inner peace. And again, this value system, which is an others-based value system, starts to look for answers as to why we're here, what our consciousness is doing, how we can improve ourselves, and how we can understand ourselves and understand other people in the meantime. This is probably John Lennon's probably one of the most green people, or was one of the most green people going. Listen to the words of Imagine if you want to get a really good fix on what the green system is about. So here it's about human bonds, social network, and the world's a community, and it's to be lived and experienced. And it's very much about experiencing things, not in a tribal sense, although you might gather lots of people together, but have a different tone to it. Smart people promote harmony in the group, and they like to share resources. And if you look around at some of the, you can see this occurring in organizations. The green drive that's in most organizations at the moment is the social responsibility drive that most big companies have moving. People in like Accenture in the UK have people designated to do social projects, and this is a drive from the green value system. This is the orange getting tired and needing to show some humanity. Harmony, exploring the inner being, the self and other. So NLP turns up in this value system. This was the summer of love, flower power, all starting to generate this kind of social network. And guilt here is not about what I've done, but for what society does. The ecology, ruining the rainforests, killing the whales. I mean, there's a whole list of green issues that you can think of. If you're working with a strong organization like this, people are the most important thing. Financial and efficiency benefits are not such a big concern. Open work areas where everybody can be together, and power and politics-based approaches just don't work. They are not interested. I mean, you've got, I don't know who you've got in your country like this, but you know, there are a number of people around. This sort of value system is also tends to be more Scandinavian as well, so it's a bigger value system in Scandinavian countries. And after 20 years, that is where Graves got to. He'd identified these big themes, the value systems, and and this is backed by a lot of evidence, and he got a lot of evidence to show that he was right. He'd been conversing and corresponding with Maslow, and towards the end of their correspondence, Maslow agreed that Graves had got a bigger and better model, and he was right. He still hadn't been telling people what he was up to, and he continued his research and found something new was happening. And what we've just seen is what's called the first tier. In those value systems, people are pretty much embedded in the strongest one of those in their system, and they don't really understand the other value systems. And he said that green knows how to collect all the dots, but not how to connect them. And that's what started to happen. We started to get some connections happening. And Graves also spotted some bigger patterns, and he called the whole model is called the emergent cyclical double helix model of adult biopsychosocial systems development, which I can't even remember, let alone say. So the patterns he saw was a reflexive dynamic, a pendulum dynamic, and a spiral dynamic, and I'm just going to quickly explain those. I've been talking about one of those as we've been going through. The reflexive dynamic is about the map and the territory. It's how our worldview and levels of existence are conditioned by the problems of existence. So if tomorrow the whole world was supposing we had a storm from the sun and it dropped all the power supplies out, our life conditions would change dramatically, and our survival would be predicated on what value systems we were going to have alive. So we would probably drop down, you know, we'd probably need to have red and purple very strongly in order to survive, because the technology wouldn't be much use. Orange becomes irrelevant in those situations. So map and territory, what changes in the world will produce changes in the value system. So what changes in the country? Excuse me. The best way to shift a company's value system is to change its life conditions. The other excuse me. So this is the adaptation process. This is the evolutionary process that goes on, the continual interaction between what's in our biological systems and what's happening out in the world. He also saw a pendulum dynamic, which I've been alluding to as we go along. So the warm systems, beige, red, orange are a focus on me, an I focus, and the cool systems are a focus on others, and the value systems switch from one to the other as we run through them. There's some evidence there. So, and the last, you then end up with a spiral with the warmer colours and the cooler colours. So in this first tier, from purple to green, when those colours are strongly lit up, the lights are turned on, if you like, then people at a different level can appear to be mad, bad, or sad. So from a red perspective, greens are pretty sad. From a green perspective, reds are bad and maybe mad too. So you can kind of sit in different systems and look out with those spectacles on. And as I said, Graves continued to do his research, and these three dynamics mean we always move from less complex to more complex ways of thinking, whether it's as an individual throughout a life. If you think about where you were as a teenager or an 11-year-old, and the complexity of your thinking has grown. It's inevitable that it happens. The trick that motivational speakers have is to attempt to make the whole thing more simple. But in fact, life's complex. Human beings are complex, and we've got big brains designed to handle that complexity. It's cyclical, so we alternate between this focus of self and others, and it has a double helix quality a bit like genetics as we move through this, our thinking adapts to the life conditions. And what's really interesting, Don Beck took the work on from Claire Graves, and what he says is the problems which change our life conditions are not produced from our failures, they're our successes. So each one of these value systems have appeared because we've been successful, not because we've been a failure. And I think that's a really interesting way to look at the whole situation. So we're successful as creatures, and it's creating out this latent software, as Eric Hart says, in our brains to light up as our life conditions change. Claire Graves continued his research and found a second ladder of existence was emerging, and this we're just going to take a look at two bits of that, and then I'm going to give you a little test and see how you can see how easy it is to come to some conclusions when you're presented with some data. This second level of existence was what he spotted, and I'm going to talk about those. And the first system was yellow. This is a system still based on self, but it's a system where the consciousness becomes aware of systems and patterns. So in this system, this is where the World Wide Web appeared. The thing about this system is it's about competency, it's about knowledge, it's about situational leadership, and it's about flexibility. So those companies that are at the forefront of things at the moment have a strong yellow theme to them because they're developing new things, putting systems together that haven't been put together before, and have the flexibility to change things and not get stuck. So this is only about 0.2% of the world, so it's very small. However, it can have a huge influence. I'll put Einstein there. There's a few other. There's also I put the chakra system in there because what seems to come with yellow is a sensitivity to energy systems. There's been a huge resurgence or a huge surge in things like Reiki and those energy medicines and all sorts of things to do with healing ourselves in a different way from normal allopathic medicine that seems to come along with this appreciation of systems and how systems fit together. You can take homeopathy as well into that field too. It's the generation of the holistic mindset. It's still focused on stuff, so you could have all this knowledge and not do anything with it. Systemic processes. It's a chaotic mesh of natural flows in emerging systems. So you accept nature's flows and look for integrated solutions. And it's still about standing on your own 2 feet and learning how, but it's also about learning how to be free. In this system, thinking is dominated by acquiring knowledge, information. This is information hungry. So this is the consciousness that I think has generated the information culture, where people have been, there's so much information out there on the web and everywhere else that knowledge is easy to get, and people are acquiring knowledge. They're also experimenting, evaluating that knowledge and learning. So if you're operating in a yellow system, you've got to be a resource. There's no lecturing here. That's old style. People will talk about this stuff anytime, any place. And strong yellow consciousness will be very resistant to inflexible systems, and they will push hard to change them. And the last one I'm going to talk about today is turquoise, which is, again, we flip to the others, and this is the global holistic organism. So this is the world as an organism. This is the Gaia thing, if you like. There's really hardly any of this about. This is very, very tiny proportion of the population. The world's a single dynamic organism with its own collective mind. This is about synergy, it's about ambiguity, about paradox. It's also about integrating spiritual and scientific together. There have not been very much turquoise writing or films at the moment. It's very, very small. I don't think we can even estimate how much. Probably from the 1970s. And if you've been watching the timeline on the bottom in the black, you'll see that these, as I said earlier on, these value systems are appearing faster and faster, especially in the second tier. Okay, so I think there was a thing called Live 8, organised by Bob Geldof, where he connected together rock bands across the world, and I think that's about the first turquoise thing I've seen. He seems to be a thought leader for this kind of stuff, because in the 80s he was responsible for Live 8.
Sure.
Which was very, very green. So that's the first little bud of turquoise that I've seen in the world so far. I think there are probably others I haven't spotted. So this is just a little, you can have this PowerPoint. This is the core values and ethics of each system.
Can I jump in? Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, have stuff.
Would like a habitat for humanity, would that kind of relate to that overall concept? I don't know if
holistic stuff. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I would. So I'm not so but that would the humanity habitat idea would definitely be the turquoise poking through.
Are you familiar with what it is?
No, tell me what it is.
It was started by Jimmy Carter, who was a president probably in the late 70s, early 80s. Yeah.
Late 70s.
And he started an organization of people that donated their time to build homes for people.
Okay.
And it's actually quite, they've built a significant amount of homes. So when you were talking about Live 8, and you know, just something to give back. So I thought that kind of lended itself to that concept.
Sure, that can be more green than turquoise, because turquoise will be on a worldwide scale.
Well, it
is on a worldwide scale.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then it's probably budding turquoise.
Okay. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's okay. I don't, an conversation is good. while I've been talking, you've been able to look at the kind of summary of the systems here. So everybody will have certainly the first tier within them. Probably many people will have the yellow system operating. And you can think of the best way to think about this is like lights on a dimmer switch. So some are turned up bright and some are turned up dim. The brighter ones are the ones that will drive your behavior. So we can appeal to the brighter lights, or we can communicate in a way that those brighter lights will be activated. I'm just going to put this psychological map up. So when you as an individual, you can move through two tracks. You can move through a self-asserting track, which is the top line: survival self, powerful self, enterprising self, and integrated self. Or you can move through a cool track, which is self-adapting, which is tribal, absolute order, the egalitarian green, and then global order turquoise. And you'll find that people will track one of these a little bit more than another. So very often people in sales will be on a warm track. Cool. Any questions so far? Because I've run through pretty much the value systems pretty quickly. There's a lot more you can say about each one of these, and then you can start to talk about how they interact.
Well, less a question, Roger, just an observation with the group of realizing this, the applications of this as we look at not just our own organization, but look at the clients that we interact with, and
absolutely
where their primary motivation might be coming from based on however they're operating, and then understanding some of those do's and don'ts, and also how we might open their eyes up to additional layers or different perspectives to increase their efficacy in what they're doing. So
yeah, and how you do that will be different depending on which light's which light's brightest.
Right. So if they're coming in from a strong red, for example, and they're very profit oriented, and then it's all about driving that. But we've got other clients, for example, like our social entrepreneurial client Impact, that they're probably coming at it from a much more green or even yellow perspective. So
yeah, I would almost certainly green yellow.
And possibly some blue, although obviously they're a for-profit social entrepreneurial business. So I mean, they obviously still want to operate there's probably some red in there as well, but but their primary drivers.
Where they need the blue is where their finances are.
Right.
So the problem with a social enterprise is that because of the nature of it, you can end up with lots of green and a bit of yellow for the visionary stuff, and not enough blue. So actually, the finances don't work.
Right.
Because nobody wants to pay attention to them.
Right.
So in terms of bigger organizations, we've got some tools that we can use with this as well. With bigger organizations, we can do surveys and find out what the center of gravity of that organization is, because this is, in a way, you can think about this as a center of gravity. What's the center of gravity of the organization? Or you can do it with the country as well. What's the center of gravity in the US at the moment? It's hovering sort of orange-blue, I imagine, with a bit of green. So you can say, okay, well, there's definitely a drive. With Britain, it's slightly different. I think because of what happened with the banks, we've slipped down to blue. We're blue, and we've lost some of the orange. We've lost some of the orange, and the orange is desperately needed to give growth. And at the moment, we've not got that. We're tootling around in the accounts by cutting everything in sight and doing austerity stuff, which doesn't promote growth.
Right.
This often happens with a disaster. You drop down a value system. I've done this with drug addicts, and that's really heroin addicts are really interesting because they have a purple theme, which is where they all get together and take drugs and inject, and they have lots of rituals and things that go with that. There's this little tribe. Then when they haven't got enough drugs, they revert to red, and they will target orange for stuff to sell and to steal. And they have usually have a huge green network of social contacts to score drugs. So this is the way they kind of interact together. So, you know, if you look at different countries, you can see different things. You can certainly see that the center of gravity can be quite different, and if the center of gravity is different, the communication needs to be different. So in America, just as an instance, the scarcity model works quite well. If you, and it, you know, in the consciousness, it works quite well because it's something that you're quite a bountiful country, and you haven't had that kind of scarcity as much as we have in Europe. In the UK, it doesn't work so well because after the Second World War, well, during the Second World War and for quite a time afterwards, there was rationing. So somewhere in people's consciousness is this thing that they can survive on nothing. So if you try and scare them with scarcity, it has no effect.
Right.
Because it's almost in the genetics there. I've just been thinking about this recently and why some of these models work better in some places than others. I'm just gonna flip past this for a second. I want to give you this bit because this is where these patterns shift under stress. So if you've got an organization and you can say, okay, well, we've got this client and they're glowing green, for instance, and because of the sort of work they're doing, that's pretty good. But if they get stressed, what happens to them? So I'm just going to give you a little bit about that because this I think is useful. So the top one is yellow. So if yellow is stressed, it will revert to blue. The consciousness will revert to blue, and rules, systems, and processes will become the thing that it sinks into. And so that, therefore, you know, that can mean that somebody that's in an entrepreneurial situation that starts to get in trouble will start monitoring things down to the nth detail.
Sure.
That's generally the result. Green is very interesting. It shifts to red. And if you look at people like Greenpeace, out there for the world, for the ecology, for the whales or whatever, yet what they do is they go off in little boats and chase whalers, and or they'll go to an island where there's going to be a nuclear test. So that's essentially red behavior, red heroic behavior. So it's stress, and if you push somebody that's has ecology at its heart, and they'll become quite forceful after a while. So it's an interesting shift. So green goes to red. Orange will slip down to red too, because there's a harmonic there. And blue, if you stress a blue system, it will do more blue. So if a blue system's under stress, it will create more rules and more rules. So if you're dealing with a blue system, and you know then they're likely to want to impose more rules on you if they think things aren't working. And red will fit back into the tribe if it's outfaced. So these are patterns. These are useful patterns to watch for.
Very.
And to know happen. Cool. Okay. So, gonna just. This is the little bit. I think this might be a bit of fun for you all to look at this. So this is a profile that comes out of this system, and it comes out as a bar chart, and it comes out of a bar chart of acceptance and rejection. So you either accept a value system or reject a value system. The length of the bars gives you the amount of energy in the system, the amount of rejection or acceptance somebody's doing. So small bars, it's pretty balanced. So I'm going to put this up, and you tell me what sort of person this is, roughly. Everybody see that?
Mm-hmm.
Any clues as to what might be going on for this person? They're a business person.
Yeah, well, I'm going to guess it's the red red orange as far as power, control, and acquisition.
Yeah. What might be not right in this person's organization, or not working.
Well, there's looks like there's a general revulsion of green.
Yeah.
You know, and trying to remember yeah, same thing, green and also globalism
The core
and
systems. Yeah.
yeah, just in
So
general.
this was a head of a business owner who had a software company that was extremely successful, and he for a while he was the only person in the marketplace with that particular solution. He was very good at selling, very aggressive. He wasn't much into people, and then he got competition in the business, and the business started to fail, and he had no team because they actually didn't like him. He didn't see the need to go for a drink with them, or even to treat them very nicely, or to compliment them for any sort of work, because it just should have been what they were doing.
Right.
He continually hired salespeople that were a very similar profile, and then fired them because they argued with him. So this, it was really quite interesting. There's not much yellow there, so he didn't look at the business from a systems perspective at all. He just saw it in slots. His accounting started to go wild. At one point he had somebody that did the accounts, but he pissed them off so much they left. And he really didn't see the need for being social with people at all. So we coached him. We didn't actually change him at all. We just put other people in his organization that he could tolerate, that would do the bits that were missing. We found a good manager for him that managed the back end of the business, and then he was out on the road selling, and he was quite happy after that. So it's interesting, even from a short tour of the values, you can start to pick up traits really quickly. I think it's very intuitive.
No, it's great.
And that's a very brief overview. Any questions? Is that useful for you all?
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've been contemplating the different places different clients are at in relationship even to our own value system as an organization, and then seeing where there's opportunities for how do you address your communication or approach given the those different value systems rubbing up against each other or being in conflict at times, and making sure that those things find a way to communicate effectively.
Yeah, you can. There's definitely this is part of what I've got a whole set of language patterns or language that goes with each value system. There are key words that I've researched that will fire up each value system. There are words that if you use in a green context will mean nothing to them, and they won't react at all. Yet there are other words that will create a bigger reaction.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So if we wanted to learn more on this or the assessment approach, how is that done?
Well, we just sort of say I can go into more detail on the value systems. This is you've had a taste of what's kind of 2 days worth, a 2-day program.
Sure.
In terms of excuse me, in terms of assessment, then we have access to online tools which you can do. The interesting thing about the online tools is that you can take a group of people and you can add them together. So that graph, you could have that for a group of people, and you could add them together, and it will give you a kind of the central gravity for that organization. And you wouldn't have to do every single person. You could do a 10% sample, depending how big the organization was.
Sure.
Or you could do the CEO. I've done that. So we set that up. We set it up so that people go into the software and do the test, and then we get the results. And we use it. We've used it for coaching in the past as well, so it's pretty good for that.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It is. Yeah.
You haven't put a lot of emphasis, at least not in the content anyways I've seen to date, for what you've been teaching.
Sorry, say that again.
On the Evolution site, I haven't seen a lot of stuff around this.
There isn't. This is what's interesting about this particular piece of knowledge is that over the years, what we've noticed is that we put it out, and we'll get a whole bunch of people come through. Then as conditions change in the world, nobody gets interested in it. So at the moment, because the center of gravity has moved away from yellow towards the blue, then their consciousnesses are not picking it up. And we offer it, and we get no takers. So it's almost it's you know, I meet people and I go, okay, you know, I can see that there's enough yellow going on there for them to pick it up, because you've got to be in second tier to get you've got to have a bit of second tier system stuff going on before you get it.
Yeah.
I've taken people through this and just haven't got it, just the same way as I've taken you through it. So we see as the conditions get better, and you know, orange comes up and then green starts to come up, more people get interested in this, more people will turn up and want the knowledge.
Yeah.
But the more they move down the spiral, the less information hungry they are for this sort of stuff, and the more information hungry they are for other things.
Yeah, it might be interesting to see how we might want to position that bit of technology in a way that might be packaged more, you know, or could be adapted in its packaging towards different shifting seasons.
Yeah.
You know, and emphasizing what the value of it is within the context of those overarching seasons, if you will. But yeah, I mean, my tendency would be to say is looking at our organization tends to, just as an observation, I think move more towards a yellow type organization.
I would say so.
Because we're just in an industry where as fast as the technology appears, it's being outdated, or you have to adjust your approaches very rapidly, because approaches that work this year may not necessarily work next year, or the fundamental underlying technology may be outmoded. You know, what were popular publishing platforms last year have been acquired or shut down, or you know, so it's just always evolving.
And if you contrast that with, you know, people who might be your clients, who might be in a more traditional sector, then what you can appear is, you know, completely out of this world to them.
Right. Well, out of this world, or mercurial at best, you know.
Yeah, mercurial at best, and you know, and also way too. So for blues, for the blue system, if the light's flat, if the light's strong in blue, then you'd be going way too fast for them.
Right.
And possibly for some orange companies as well that are big, you know, that are commercially sound and good at sales and good at getting stuff in. They wouldn't necessarily get it either. So you can actually be in yellow and go too fast for people. I have a friend of mine. Sorry?
No, I was just agreeing with you.
Yeah, no, I have a friend of mine in London who's runs a primary school. And she says, Roger, you know, it's all very well this, but you know, we're ordinary people here.
Yeah.
So it's kind of when you're on the kind of head of the curve, it's you've got to come back a little bit and find ways of talking to people that aren't.
Yeah, no, I mean, I equate it to being at a backyard barbecue with people, you know, from my family, trying to explain what it is we do as a business, and the general look on their face that, you know, to them, you know, it's all Star Trek and science fiction. So
yeah, indeed it is, and it gets more so, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, trying to explain to somebody who's a delivery truck driver, you know, how you make a living on the internet from a spare bedroom in your home,
Yeah.
it's a fundamental disconnect, you know. But I think that that's true in our clients too. When we don't take into account what business they're in versus the business we're in,
Yeah.
and how we cross that divide from a communication standpoint to make sure that there's actual connection happening and that we're effective in that communication.
One of the nice things that you can do with this, you know, if we were running a class, you know, a live class, I'd have you create a map of your contacts. So you can do it pretty easily. You put yourself or your company in the middle, and then you, like a mind map, you come out with your clients, and then make some estimation of, you know, where they are on the spiral, where's their brightest light shining. And it can be quite a useful map to have, and it's quite a useful thing to do as a team. So because you'll all have different light configurations, and so you'll have different perceptions. But when you start to bring them together, it can be really insightful in terms of how successful the communication can be. And then, you know, you can look at this, and you can look at your clients' clients, and have an estimate of where they are in terms of how you need to communicate with them.
Yep.
Good.
Yeah,
Any other questions, thoughts?
None for me. I just want to go back and actually sort of do an informal application of this across, you know, just kind of looking at the clients we have in our portfolio and understanding where their primary modality is right now, and then and all the rest. And I'd love some information from you about the assessment and stuff like that.
Yeah, we can talk about that. There's no problem talking about that. And any come back with any questions, because that's because this always raises more questions, and this definitely raises, or should raise, more questions than answers.
Absolutely.
I'm interested to see how it helps you look at your clients, because go on.
Well, no, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's okay. I'll finish what I was saying.
Yeah, no, the first very helpful thing is saying, okay, just based on the overall definitions, being able to see ourselves in essentially a yellow mode, and then that gives us context then for, you know, knowing ourselves in light of the type of organizations we're serving. And I can think of right off the top of my head, some of our clients are down at purple and brown. You know, they're in survival mode. You know, and so self-actualization and being able to think higher thoughts and go into large, long-term thinking is very difficult for them, because their world exists around, you know, immediate needs that sometimes marketing can't move fast enough to address, and so there's really other strategies that have to be implemented for that business to be able to survive.
Yeah.
So there's that, and then there's clients that I can see who are very much in a blue world, and they have strong sense of, you know, what they want to achieve, but unfortunately their context is rigid, and the marketing world isn't. And so the marketing world is forcing the issue of, you know, testing outdated or outmoded assumptions, and requires a naturally inquisitive mindset that's always looking, not really caring what the answer is, but more interested in finding answers.
Find an answer. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's not invested in the way the answer shows up. It just wants to find it. And at odds with someone who said, you know, whose mindset says, no, this is the way the answer must show up. And you know, and then that rigidity is creating challenges for them in their marketing.
And that's very likely to be blue. We've done it this way. We've always done it this way. It's always worked before. We just carry on doing what we're doing.
Right.
And sometimes, you know, because it's worked and we don't understand why it doesn't work. That's a very common, you know, that's a very common blue company perspective.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of just one client in particular, without talking out of school. This is a client based in Mexico,
Yeah.
and you do have that sort of heavy blue Catholic culture influence
Sure.
there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they use traditional marketing, but e-marketing is a relatively new discipline in Mexico. There's not a lot of established best practices yet because it's easily 5 years behind the U.S.
Yeah.
As far as the maturity of the infrastructure and things like that. But they're trying to apply, well, what are the proven models in Mexico? Well, there are no proven models in Mexico.
Yeah.
It's all new. And
Yeah.
you can't look at what works in the U.S. and Europe and say that it necessarily translates, because it doesn't.
Yeah. I definitely think that it's this kind of Europe, USA. There's big, the differences there are worth thinking about, because kind of definitely affects the type of marketing that you can do and the type of audience that will be attracted.
Yeah. So I think this was tremendously valuable,
Good.
Roger, and really appreciate you investing this time with us and sharing this bit of technology. And I do think it's something that we need to find a way to make sure it's present in what you're doing on a broader scale. So
Great.
just as we look into the content calendar and such and all the rest, I'd like us to look at how do we package up this particular bit of know-how within the context of the whole new approach we're taking. So,
well, that would be. I mean, this would be. What we're with the Super U. What we're essentially doing is creating these value shifts without the aid of life conditions changing. That's the challenge, because generally these things don't shift until somebody's life conditions change.
Exactly.
They have a stroke, they get a serious disease, and it shifts the value system. And generally, it doesn't happen for people. So we've got to find. Where it doesn't happen on a permanent basis, I think I see what happens with people like Anthony Robbins, who come and he gets a big audience over here. He'll get 3,000 people.
Sure.
He'll come in and he'll boost them up to yellow for a bit.
Yep.
But what happens over 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, people crash.
Yep.
Because it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
And that's the whole difficulty, and that's the difficulty with a lot of that kind of approach, is that it isn't sustainable. It lifts people, sure, and then they crash, but it also creates an addiction.
Right, absolutely. I mean, it becomes
it's kind of, in my mind, a bit unhealthy.
Yeah, well, that's the seminar.
Highly profitable, however.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We call that the seminar junkie,
Yeah.
who's looking for the endorphin rush that comes from that new and exciting thought and idea and approach and whatever. But the core underpinnings for supporting that worldview don't exist.
Yeah.
Meaning the footings that you showed it earlier. You showed the three sort of tiers that build, the reality, or the beliefs and actions and what's being experienced in the real. And a lot of times those ascension moments where they ascend to yellow or even turquoise or something and have that sort of ascension moment, but the core underpinnings of their belief systems and values and all the other aspects culturally they've built around themselves are totally different.
Yep, and it's not sustainable.
Right.
And it's exactly the same as taking a heroin addict, getting them off heroin, and then putting them back in the same place they came from.
Exactly.
So, I really wanted to share this with you, because this is kind of in my, as I'm thinking about Super U and all the other things, it's definitely in my consciousness, and this understanding about how value systems shift and how people change. In this sense, in this kind of big sense, is very useful.
No, deeply. So, very good. All right. Anything else from the crowd?
Good.
No.
They've all gone quiet.
Wonderful. It's wonderful.
All right.
Presentation.
No, thanks so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, very useful for us, and
Good.
also useful in the context of looking at the things we're doing with you specifically,
Yeah.
and where they're coming from and headed towards and all the rest. So very valuable. So
Good.
yeah, I'll look forward to following up with you, Roger, on the back end. If you can just shoot me some information about the assessment and all the rest, I'd love to look at that.
Yeah, I'll have to. Do you want me to send you some information on the assessment?
Yeah, just help me get a sense for timings, costings, things like that.
Yeah,
Because,
yeah, okay.
You know, we're a learning organization by nature.
Sure.
It's our first and fundamental core value. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's two. We never stop.
Yeah. We can't afford to.
Our
industry, you can become an anachronism immediately.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. Well, it's working that way in this one as well.
So, yeah, very good, very good. All right, thank you guys. Thank you everyone for participating. Thank you, Roger, for sharing with us. And
thanks, Roger.
cheers. Bye for now, guys.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.